Ingrun. Would love to understand a bit about what your role is at Accenture. Just help us understand about your team, the types of things that you do on a day-to-day basis, and then we can deep dive into some of the topics that I mentioned.
All right. Yeah. So I've been in trade compliance for several years now. It's about 18 years. Right now at Accenture, I'm part of the global trade compliance team, and we have different divisions taking care of export control, but also for sanctions separately, and also educating and training. And we are a global team. I'm located in Hamburg, Germany, taking care for the Central and Eastern European part. And as well, I'm a little bit specialized for the defense and military industry due to my background. And so we're trying to cover the whole business by having people in different locations like France, Canada, India, UK, and Accenture is as a consulting company active in a lot of different branches. So it's very challenging to catch everything and to get a good visibility of ongoing business to make sure that we can support the business in staying compliant and ensuring the business
Yeah.
for Accenture.
Got it. Accenture doesn't produce any tangible goods, right? It's mainly services. So how does
Yes.
trade compliance play a part, or like what is the complexity when it comes to something that is non-tangible?
The most or the biggest challenge is, like you just indicated, it is not tangible. So usually if you have hardware, you usually have a system where you have the necessary steps that it keeps you from executing a delivery, because a delivery is blocked before the physical item can be sent out. But the intangible is, of course, first raising the awareness that intangibles are also controlled, right? Because for most people, it is not really clear. It's really hard to grab. And so raising the awareness is the first step. And then the second is to identify what kind of data is controlled, right? I mean, it's not every kind of data, and it's even not every technical data, but still to first to catch what by the nature of the data itself could possibly be controlled, then verifying whether it is really controlled, then making sure that it is identified somehow and that the people working with the data are aware of that, and not only identifying the data, but also the people working with the data. Because due to the nature of controls, do we have any additional requirements, like who has access to that data, and do we have to check certain nationalities and other security checks? Because where is the data going? Where are the servers located? Where's the data stored? What additional requirements are also from the client, for example? So it's not only by the local export control or sanctions regulation, but also additional requirements from the client, for example. Or if we go to restricted businesses, there are also additional security measurements that might apply. And something that we also experienced is that it's not always the export side, as it says export control, but also how does data get back. Most of the times we have international teams working from all over the world. So we have data flows and data exchange. Yeah? It's not only a one-time export, but it's getting back and forth, and then keeping in mind it's not only from the location where I start transferring data, but also from where it is getting back. And are there also additional restrictions that might apply from other locations when sending data back? And of course, we are all used to work remotely. To have Teams or Google Meet or whatever, joint calls from all over the world, sharing the screen and making data available with just hitting the button one time. And this is something that needs to get into everyone's head, that be careful with what you are sharing and showing to others. And it is a really
Yeah.
big challenge, and it's about training, but also identifying the data.
Yeah, it,
Absolutely.
it does feel a lot more challenging than like a tangible goods, because I've
Absolutely.
spoken to people who are in, say, automobile manufacturing, and over there
Hmm.
they know that they have, say, 600,000 parts that needs to be compliant, right? But in your
Right.
case, it sounds like there's no real measurement of what is the volume of things that can then export control or import processes can apply to. So is there a notion of volume at Accenture like a manufacturer typically?
I mean, the most thing that we are dealing with is that we are not really creating initially data, but we work with the client data, which is in, let's say, 90% the case. And
Hmm.
then we are also relying on the client to provide us with the right information. And what we do also in some cases experience that even on the client end, it's very challenging for them to make sure we have awareness of what kind of data we have, because a lot of times data is still mixed up. It is not always that clear. It's not black and white. This is controlled. This is not controlled. It's rather blurry. In some cases, if we talk about technical data, for example, right? If we talk about complete manufacturing data, it's rather clear in drawings and blueprints and things like that. But if we only talk about parts of that, what is crucial and essential and might be controlled due to that. And data segregation is another big thing, right? I mean, not everyone has the data stored properly and segregated due to controlled data and non-controlled data. And sometimes they take the very easy way and say, please take the highest controls just to be on the safe side. But this causes a lot of additional and unnecessary work, of course. It would be easier to have a clear picture what is really controlled, and then do we really have to apply for an export license, for example, or is it rather commercial or marketing data or something that is not
Hmm.
controlled? Yeah, so
Okay.
that's
Okay. Got
the
it.
main issue.
And is there like an active trade compliance related problem that you're working on today? Is there like an active, not problem, but say a project that you're working on which is impactful towards the company?
So what is really now challenging is first of all, to identify ongoing projects. So we try to do this by identifying high risk industry and to understand in what kind of industry potentially export controls do mainly apply, right? And then it's like a net that we are woven, and to make sure it's not too tight so that we catch unnecessary things and we block the business unnecessarily, but not to make it too wide that the important things are falling down and are not caught by us. And since Accenture is involved in so many different kind of industry and businesses, it's very crucial to understand the business side as well. And I always have the view that the trade compliance organization in a company is like the tiny export control authorization institution, like we have in all countries, right? So the questions we ask is more or less the same what our national authorities would ask for. And to understand what the business is really doing ensures that we do not block too much, right? And but still provide the necessary guardrails and the necessary measurements to make sure that the business is not violating any export control related issues. But the first step is to understand what are we involved in, what kind of service do we provide, to what kind of data do we have access to, what are you working with, also from a technical perspective to have a understanding. And this is what we are encountering right now, since we have a new tool that tries to catches everything in the first place and then to make the correct releases. Yeah, it's a little bit the principle that we know from the US re-export control regulations, catch and release, right? You have a broad approach and then make sure to release as soon as possible all the non-controlled things and focus really on the sensitive projects and identify there what needs to be controlled and what steps needs to be taken to make sure that the business is been done in a compliant manner.
Interesting. I would imagine that this particular project, while you have a tool, requires all teams and the people of those teams to be submitting a lot of information so that
Right,
you, as the trade compliance team, understand what's going on. Can you talk a
right.
little bit about how the workflow of this project will be? What are the different stages of review? And how do you make sure it's continuously updating itself?
So the first step is to identify critical or high-risk industries. So if we have a business in a high-risk industry, that's the first catch. And then the next deep dive is, are you involved with the data exchange? Yes or no? What kind of data is that? In the best case, we get information from the client about the nature of the data, whether it is export controlled or not. The next step is, do we have any cross-border activities, right? To identify if we have a data exchange within the same countries, the server are all within the same country, there is no export control exposure that makes us nervous, right? So, but the cross-country exchange is the one that we are focusing on. If there is a cross-country data exchange, where are the servers located, and by what means is the data being exchanged? What tools do you use? And so the question gets more detailed and more detailed, and in this way we are trying, like a funnel, to really get to the core of it and then make a final decision whether a business can continue or whether it is on hold. And we as trade compliance step in and do the next step, like applying for an export license or instructing the business to provide further information, for example, or talk to the client, or we reach out to the trade compliance team of the clients, because sometimes it is easier if, the people from the same staff talked directly to each other than talking about technical issues. Yeah, I have a basic technical understanding, of course, for the project we are doing, but it's always easier to have the right people talking directly to each other rather than having, something like Chinese whispering, right? I start telling something and in the end, something different turns out. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Accenture is almost like a $70 billion business. And trade compliance or when things go wrong, there could be an impact directly on the P&L of the company, of any company, right? So
absolutely.
What do you think is the level of awareness at, say, the executive level of the risks when it comes to trade compliance? I mean, I won't quote you on this, but this is just in general from your experience as well. I can imagine maybe at the junior level, the awareness is lower, but just from a P&L impact perspective, what's your experience been with executives giving it enough importance or executives knowing the impact of poor trade compliance directly on P&L?
So, I mean, at Accenture, the awareness is rather high, and we have a clear tone from the top about trade compliance. However, as I know from my experience in other companies, and as well, to the exchange in the trade compliance network, the awareness rises, and always in that case where a violation occurs or during an audit from the authorities, there are any violations, they find any violations, and then the awareness is really, really high. And then it's like, why didn't you tell us, and why didn't we pay more attention to that in the first place? In a lot of cases, as long as everything goes smoothly, a lot of managing directors, etc., are like, okay, I'm responsible for everything, they can catch me for everything, and it's been going well for so long. What should happen, right? I mean, we know our customers. And so as long as nothing happens, it's rather difficult to determine what is the real benefit. It's hard to provide any figures for a company or for a trade compliance organization. It's rather difficult to say, hey, we saved you from penalties of an amount A, Y, Z. Nobody knows that, and I cannot prove that. If you have a violation and you have to pay a fine, a monetary fine of, I don't know, so and so many million euros, dollars, etc., then the attention raises, of course, and then it is even clear to the top management. It really depends a little bit, I think, on the background of the management. So, I mean, it's not black and white, but if you have more like salespeople there, or from the mindset, it's maybe not that self-understanding. If you have people coming from maybe from quality, or coming from high regulated industry like aviation, for example, they have a better awareness that rules and regulations do have a sense and are more willing to follow this and to implement it. But if you have a lot of hands-on managers, it's sometimes it is helpful if there's a tiny violation, not too harmful, but that they understand it can really have an impact. And I always try to explain trade compliance to be an asset, right? I mean, if you can offer your clients this knowledge and you can ensure your client, hey, we know what we're doing and we know how to do this in a compliant manner, and we can even support you if you maybe are not that well or not that familiar with all this kind of regulations. We can help you on this. It is an additional value we can offer to the clients, right? And then it does, of course, have also an impact on not only on the fines and penalties, but also on the turnover, hopefully, and the
Yeah,
margin.
yeah, no, makes sense. I think having that awareness at the highest level then sort of brings a culture also of awareness at every level. So that will certainly help. When it comes to export control, since you mentioned that a couple of times, US has like ECCN, ITAR regulations. EU has its dual use. India has something called SCO Met. So every country has its own things going on, right?
Mhm.
How do you ensure that the teams that are on your trade compliance side of things are knowledgeable to handle those types of queries? And in general, on a weekly or a monthly basis, how many ECCN types of queries do you get?
So we have first, like I initially mentioned, we have a global team, right? So in the countries we are most dealing with, we have our own local export control experts. So they are
Hmm.
familiar with the local regulations. And then when it comes to classification, we have in the countries where we have our own staff, they know what they're doing, of course. In cases where we do not have our own stuff, we have external support to help us on the classification. And again, in a lot of times we have to work together with our client depending on the geographical locations where we set up the business and who is involved. And we do have like an estimate of, let's say, 20 classifications a week coming up. And yeah, it is, of course, a lot more difficult with technology rather than physical assets, of course. Yeah, but this is how we handle this with our local experts. And in case it's in a geographic region, we have no local support, then we are seeking external support on that.
Okay, okay, got it. So that's a good segue because I also wanted to understand, based on my conversations with, say, the automobile or an aircraft parts company, where they tend to not just have an in-house team, but because the volumes are so great, they are actually outsourcing a lot of the HS classification work to, say,
Yeah,
an agency, right?
right.
On the Accenture side, like just in principle, what do you think should be or could be outsourced to an external party? And what should absolutely not be outsourced and always be kept in-house?
What always should be kept in-house is the responsibility, of course, and it remains. So classification is, I think, one of the typical things that could be outsourced, provided, yeah, that you have someone external with the right expertise and you ensure you have the right communication, because classification can only happen as good as the information that is provided to base that classification on that, and a good knowledge on the business, on the context as well, right? Because in some cases it's not only the classification, but export control is also about the final end use. And when it comes to that and making the final business related decision, I think it's very difficult to outsource that, because you need to have the very good understanding of the business, of the nature of the business. And then it is, I mean, we work a lot of remotely, which is an additional challenge, because it is far easier to be in between the team and not the export control team, but being with the business team, being among them, meeting them at the coffee machine and catching, some things ongoing about new projects, about potential new clients, where they're located, etc. So being around the operational working teams is very helpful. And I think the awareness and also the willing to follow the rules is easier if there's someone within the company and someone of the own team, and is also my approach to make it as easy as possible for the operational teams to reach out to export control and trade compliance, right? I mean, they should not be afraid of asking wrong question or stupid question. It is always my approach to say, hey, it's a very complex topic. I am the expert and it took me ages to get there and I'm still learning, right? You're never done with export controls. It's always an ongoing journey to learn. And I don't expect you to know everything, right? I'm the one to deal with the paragraphs and to see how to use them and to deal with them. I just want you as the business, at the operational team, to be aware that there is something like trade compliance, right? And then reach out and make it as easy and comfortable as possible for them, and not like, we rather don't ask trade compliance because they might say no and then we cannot do the business, etc. I just,
Yeah.
try to make sure we are a business enabler. And I think that's easier done if you're part of the same company, of the team, and not having an external source to reach out to and to deal with. Because I think it's rather easy to keep them really out, not from an organizational perspective, but it's like, oh, we just don't tell them, we just move on with our business, and then we can make the deal. So I think it's very important to stay with the team,
Yeah.
and make
Yeah.
sure you're part of it.
Got it. Got it.
Yes.
Now, let's say that internally you have to run a fire drill audit. What I mean by that is just to see, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how compliant is the business, right? And you want to
Mhm.
do an internal audit so that you're well prepared in case there is an external audit. What are 3 or 4 things that you would plan for as part of that?
Yeah. So I think the very first step should always be, and not audit related, but general, to have regular trainings to keep the awareness high, right? We need well-educated people. And in such big companies like Accenture, you have always a lot of trainings, not only for trade compliance, but for a lot of other issues, and trainings regarding AI, regarding data security, etc., etc. So whenever you're done with all your trainings, the ones you had in the first place, the attention is really down. Yeah. So you always have to make sure that with your own topics, you are up on top again of that. So keeping the awareness high is the main issue. The second thing is, of course, the documentation, right? In export control, nobody knows what's going on in your head, and what were your thoughts and what were your ideas when doing the business, and what were the checks that you did. It's very important to have it documented. And this is what we are doing in our tool. We have the communication with the business in that tool. We are asking the questions, we are getting the replies, we are adding hard copies. We have documentation of the customer, of the business they're doing, of the assets that are, or the items that are involved in that deal. We have information about how it is being used. We have information about classification, and everything is stored in the tools. And so whenever we have an external audit, we would be able to provide all this information stored in that tool, also with an audit trail where it is easy for the external auditor to follow what were the single steps that we took. What did we check? What was the outcome? And how was our evaluation of that? Why did we approve, or why did we ask for additional information? And why didn't we see any export control risk, or why did we apply for a license? And by using this tool and only approving internally a project case whenever all information is provided in a sufficient manner, I think we are very well prepared for any external audit that may come.
Awesome, awesome. So just the fact that you're documenting things and people are writing stuff down, and there's a tool that is used for auditability or traceability, you're just
Yeah,
by default audit proof in that sense. So that's
right,
like a very
right.
fundamental change that has happened.
Yeah, it is, but it's absolutely necessary. But because it's always necessary to have it audit proof for the authorities. What did we do? And even if it's a non-critical business, it is also very important to have this documented as well, right? Because when we only have the export control relevant opportunities filed in the tool, the auditor would ask, hey, and what about the other kind of businesses? And how did you make an assessment on them? And how did you come to the conclusion it's not critical and you do not need any license or anything like this? So this is why it is also important to have documentation about the non-critical business as well. Of course, it makes sense to kind of group it, right? If we have repeatedly the same things coming up, we can put them together in business groups, for example, and make bulk approvals, also not to cause too much work on everyone's side. But we also need to make sure when something changes, right, the parameters of the business do change, another client, different business scope, different technology being accessed, another country or team members from different country be added to the opportunity, etc. So if anything changes, that this is being reported and a new evaluation is made to ensure it's still compliant, or adding team members from another country requires now an additional clearance from an export control perspective. But be always ready. It's always too late when the auditors announcing their visit, when if you try to clear up things, then that's rather too
Yeah.
late. You have to stay up all the time with that.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. What's a trade related story that you would share with your grandkids? It could be something that had some risk. It could be something that turned out to be funny. Like what might you share with your grandkids that, hey, this happened at work today?
So this is how I started into trade compliance, because originally I was in the sales and purchase department. I was on my own responsible to in the chemical trading world to get things from A to B all by myself, right, and identify the right sources and working with the clients. And then when I just really started my career and was really young, I got a business with the Ministry of Defense of Estonia. And back then, Estonia was not a member of the EU, right? Talking about dual use goods, etc. It's easygoing within the EU, but as a third country, as it was back then, for export controlled items, you would need a license. So, like I said, it was the Ministry of Defense. I was very proud to have a big fish. Yeah, someone we could start with a frame contract and a regular business, etc. And they asked for potassium chloride, which is an explosive and could be used for munition. And I was like, oh, I'm well aware of export control, so I asked them what would be the final end use of the potassium chloride, and they said, well, it's for munition, but only for training purposes. So I made the deal, and then I was called to the export control person back then. I was like, what the heck are you doing there? I was like, well, I mean, it's a very reliable customer. It's an official customer. And I even asked for the final end use, and they said it's only for training purposes. So what's the problem? And I was really not aware that the end use itself it does not really matter. If you have a controlled item, you do need a license regardless what is the final purpose, what it will be used for. But still back then, that's over 20 years ago, the awareness for export control was rather low back then. And so I thought I made everything right, and I thought I did think ahead. But in the end, just a training purpose does not make it a harmless item that can be dealt with without the authorization for export. And that was something that really, stayed in my head. And when I changed to the other side, being export control expert on the other side, I share the story also to the salespeople and tell them, I understand you. Yeah, I hear you. I know where you're coming from.
Yeah,
Now I'm trying to educate you.
yeah, yeah.
So
No,
that's something that
that's
I always
interesting.
keep.
That's a
Yeah.
close shave, I suppose,
Yeah.
early on in your career.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And how do you, after 20 years, how do you stay up to date with everything that's changing and the tariffs that's changing? Maybe there's a bunch of changes on export also.
Yeah.
How do you like? What do you read? What do you listen to? Or whom do you talk to stay up to date?
Yeah, there are a lot of different sources I use. There are official ones, of course, like from the EU or from, in my case, the German national authorities, the BAFA. They have newsletters. There are a lot of law firms that offer newsletters. They offer free webinars. I take care of my network so that we can exchange in between. And if someone hears something or knows something new, stays in touch with the authorities, that it is being spread in our export control network. We have trade magazines in Germany, for example, that I regularly read, listening to podcasts and the news, of course, what is ongoing from which end of the world. Things may change to be ahead of time. And what I also always try to be part of industry associations, and they in a lot of cases have also different working groups for export control, for example. And this is something where you get information about upcoming regulatory changes as well, and where you also have the chance to maybe to influence it a little bit, right? If new laws and regulations are upcoming, also staying in touch with the national authorities about, for example, general export licenses. I mean, they are really interested in working together with the industry and to make life a little bit easier, especially in Germany. We had a big shift with regards to the defense industry, because in Germany and previous times it was always a very difficult issue with defense and military industry due to German history. But now, a couple of years ago, we had a shift, and the authorities really trying to make life a lot easier and to shorten the time, the approval times for export licenses. So newsletters, proactive news watching and hearing, being in exchange with the authorities, being in exchange with industry associations and the own network, having your ears more or less everywhere. This is how I'm trying to stay updated with anything that may come up within the next hours or tomorrow.
Yeah, that I mean that's what's happening, right? Every other
Yeah,
day, there's new things change, right?
absolutely.
It's almost like staying up to date with AI updates. I feel it's like
Yeah,
everything's changing every day.
and that's the
Yeah,
next big challenge, right?
yeah,
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 how to
absolutely.
use it.
Yeah, yeah. Any like explorations internally on using AI to help with trade compliance? Is that something that you, as just as a leader, believe will be helpful, or do you feel you're sort of on the other side where you think it's a risk?
No, well, as an item to be controlled, it is of course also a risk, right? Because the dual use term will be broadened in a lot of ways. But I think we use AI to make life easier for us. But I think when it comes to customs and tariffs and things like that, it might be easier to use AI to make final decisions on export control using AI will still take some time. It is very important here still to keep the human in the loop to make sure that make the evaluation. But we can use AI already in a lot of cases for providing initially decisions and then working on this as an expert and using it as a tool to support us on templates, on policies and things like that, right? So that we do not have to write everything down by ourselves, but get it drafts and things like that provided by AI and then refine it with our own expert input. But to rely solely on AI decisions, whether I can execute a business and execute an export, something like that, I think it will still take some time, but we have to use it as a tool. And I think it can be very helpful if, but we have to be very cautious. And like I said, AI as an item to be controlled, it will be very challenging because yeah, it can be used either way, right? And then we have to be very vigilant yeah, what the future brings on that.
Ingrun, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Really, really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It was my pleasure to be with you here and enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much for having me.